Okay, this is Patricia Harpring, Managing Editor of the Getty Vocabulary Program, and I'm just going to quickly go over what the Getty Vocabularies are, and from the editorial perspective, just one or two issues that we've encountered in moving to linked open data. Okay, how do I go forward? All right, there we go. And I also want to just point out at this time, we've published a book, Introduction to Controlled Vocabularies, and we have a new revised edition that includes a chapter on linked open data that's available. Okay, the AAT, TGN, ULAN, and CONA contain multilingual terminology and other related data to describe visual arts and architecture, as well as other cultural heritage works and conservation, archaeology, archival materials, and related information. The Getty Vocabularies are valued as authoritative because they grow through contributions from experts, and the contributors and sources are cited. Then we compile, merge, and edit them here at the Getty Vocabulary Program in cooperation with our technical team. The data is made available in various ways and has been for many years now through relational tables and XML format. We have web services APIs, and now we're moving into the world of linked open data, so we can structure it and make it openly accessible and shareable. For the AAT and TGN, we've used the Open Data Commons Attribution License, which allows sharing and creation and adaptation of the data provided attribution is given. We have various pages on our site about linked open data. This is one of the main ones, and I believe Joan Cobb, the next presenter, will talk more about that. The Getty Vocabularies are thesauri, all of them are. They're compliant with national NISO and ISO standards for thesaurus construction. They also are compliant with and map to other standards, including categories for the description of works of art, CCO, the VRA Core, as well as LIDO and CDOC CRM. The features that allow the Getty Vocabularies to be used in cataloging and retrieval and now in linking include these. Each vocabulary record, each term in that record, and other various data in that record are identified by unique numeric persistent IDs. And many other fields are controlled by lookup lists. Also, the vocabularies are linked to each other, and they share a core data structure. Starting off with the art and architecture thesaurus, it contains generic terms, that is non-proper names, for describing art and architecture, including fine art and built works, but also decorative arts and visual surrogates and archival materials and archaeology. It is multilingual, and there are several large AAT translation projects underway right now. This is the level of the facets. The terms are, this is the upper level of the AAT structure, and conceptually it's arranged from terms to describe abstract concepts on the one end, all the way through to generic terms to describe physical objects on the other side. The AAT is not organized by subject matter or discipline. Talking about the thesaurial relationships, the equivalence relationship is maybe the most obvious. All of these terms, Raita and Raiton, the others, refer to the same concept. The other important relationship is the hierarchical relationship, and the AAT is the genus-species relationship, so these Raita are culinary containers. And there's a third relationship, the associative relationship. In this case, we're noting that Raita are distinguished from stirrup cups and Sturzbeckers. Here's a sample AAT record for bobbin lace, which is depicted in that little illustration. You see the unique AAT ID, the terms in various languages. We have associative relationships linking to some of the equipment needed to produce bobbin lace. The hierarchical relationship, it's under needlework in the visual works hierarchy. Scope notes in various languages, as well as our contributors. We've taken data from all of these contributors and merged it together into one record. We also name our published or online or original sources as well. Now I'm going to use the same record displayed differently to tell you about our contribution projects. Academia Sinica in Taiwan is translating the AAT into Chinese. The RKD has translated most of the AAT into Dutch. The Center of Documentation in Santiago, Chile has done most of the terms in Spanish. And we have a new effort underway now with a project in Berlin translating the AAT into German. And with the broken arrow there, I just want to point out that we have had efforts in the past of translating the AAT in parts, not the full AAT, by various other projects, including CHIN and the ICCD in Rome. And these translation projects are not the only contributors. Recently, we've had a number of thousands of conservation terms added through an effort organized by the Getty Conservation Institute. Going on to the Getty Thesaurus of Geographic Names, here we have names and other information for current and historical administrative places, such as cities and empires, as well as physical features. It also includes formerly inhabited places, such as archaeological sites, or even historical places with unknown exact location, but we know them from documentation. We call these lost settlements. But the TGN does focus on places important to the study of art and related disciplines. As with all the vocabularies, it grows through contributions, mostly from large national geographic databases, and for the historical information from the expert user community, archaeology projects, scholars, etc. Here's a sample TGN record for Siena, Italy, with the name in various languages. This hierarchical view allows me to point out that the vocabularies are polyhierarchical. Here we see Siena and its modern location as part of Tuscany, which is part of Italy. And also, with a historical relationship, it was part of Etruria. An associative relationship is listed. It was an ally of Pisa. We have place types, city, commune, etc., that describe the place. These are controlled terms that come from the AAT. We have coordinates, and for some of the records, we have notes. We also include contributors and sources. Going on to the union list of artist names, it contains names and other information for people, artists, but also patrons and sitters, and corporate bodies such as repositories and studios who are in one way or another related to the creation or conservation of art. It also includes current and historical associative relationships. So we try to capture the student-teacher, firm member relationships, etc. Contributions to ULAN are from experts, such as museums and art libraries, various cataloging projects. And ULAN has contributed to the Virtual International Authority file. I think it's the only or one of the only non-national library projects that contributes to VOF. Now, within the last several years, due to CONA and user requirements, we have increased and broadened the scope a little bit of ULAN to those non-artists I mentioned, the sitters and patrons. Also unknown people by culture, such as unknown Aztec. This is different from an anonymous master whose identity is known, whose personality is known and his artworks are known. We just don't know his name. And then we've recently published a newest facet, which we call the unidentified named people. And these are thousands of records who have been sitting in ULAN for many years, and they often come from original archival documents, and we don't know exactly who they really are, their true identity, and maybe it's unknowable, but we do include them in this facet. Here's a sample record from ULAN for Albrecht Dürer with his name in many languages. We have nationalities and roles that are controlled by the AAT, his gender. We have other things such as birth and death, places, other events controlled by the AAT and TGN. Now in ULAN we have these associative relationships. Dürer was an apprentice of Michael Wohlgemuth, a child of Albrecht Dürer the Elder, etc., and contributors and sources. Now, moving on to the Cultural Objects Name Authority, or CONA. This vocabulary includes titles and other information for movable works, such as paintings and sculptures and ceramics, as well as architecture. It includes works that are executed, but also those that are only designed. For example, a built work may have only design drawings and plans, and it was never built. These can be works that are extant or destroyed and historical. I'll show you some examples of those. CONA is a thesaurus, but it is mapped to CDWA, CCO, and also CDOC, CRM, and LIDO, and I think Joan might speak about that. CONA grows through contributions from repositories of art, but also from the expert cataloging and scholarly community. CONA, the simplified entity relationship diagram for CONA, shows how it has the same sort of overall diagram as CDWA and CCO, with the CONA record in the middle can be linked to itself and linked to the various vocabularies and sources. What is a minimal record in CONA for a contributor? It's really just a short list of core fields, although we have many fields, hundreds of fields that are available if the information exists, so we can record very rich data with CONA. So now, under discussion are the possible applications of CONA. This is what we're doing now. The most obvious one is that CONA can merge information from various sources and contributors about a given architectural or movable work, provide a unique ID for that work out in the LOD world. The information from the repository of that work, if it's a movable work, will be preferred by us, but other opinions and additional information of scholars could be included. And there are also some other ways CONA could be useful, we believe. It could be a resource to link the Getty Vocabularies to existing records of art and architecture. It could link subject terminology to these records. And it could facilitate linking between works that are held in different repositories, etc. And I have a few slides to show that as I wind up here. First of all, just to illustrate the point, CONA can bring together all this information about this one work of art, the Adoration of the Magi in the Pinacoteca in Siena. Now we have the CONA ID for it at the top of the screen, which identifies it. The title preferred by the repository is flagged. And here we have an example where the date of execution is in dispute. And CONA records in the main display the date that is preferred by the repository. But there are scholars now who believe that this date is not correct, that it's a much later painting based on stylistic analysis. The Pinacoteca recognizes a contract that has been discovered for around this date for a big Adoration of the Magi in San Domenico in Siena, and they believe that contract applies to this painting. But the Metropolitan Museum of Art has another Adoration of the Magi, which stylistically seems to fit better with this earlier date. And there could be Adorations of the Magi that no longer exist. But anyway, this richness of the scholarly discussion could be captured within CONA. CONA could link work records to the Getty Vocabularies. Here we have a vase from the National Palace Museum in Taiwan, and the work type vase is linked to the AAT. So we have the richness of the AAT variant names and other links within the AAT that can be applied when searching across work records. Here's another way to display it. This is a record from the Rijksmuseum in Kona, where we have the various titles. Work type is linked to the AAT. The creator is linked to ULAN. Locations are linked to ULAN and TGN, depending on whether or not it's a repository or a geographical place. Materials to the AAT, events and cultures to the AAT, and then subjects to various Getty Vocabularies. And the same thing works with architecture. Here we have Hagia Sophia, and you can see how it's linked to the AAT and ULAN and TGN, etc. Now we need tools to link this object data to the other Getty Vocabularies. In-house, we have a tool that allows us, when we get a record in Kona, for example, this drawing by the architect Pierre Koenig, we need to link that artist to ULAN. And we have various automated ways to try to do that. If there's enough information there, we can make a very good match. But humans also have to step in when the information doesn't match exactly or the incoming data doesn't have enough information. But at this point, this is where this CONA record is linked to ULAN. Another way CONA could be useful is to link to depicted subjects. Whereas libraries have a tradition of cataloging the subjects of their works, many art museums typically do not index subject matter that's depicted in or represented by their works, such as the sitters and places and iconographical themes, etc. There was a survey conducted several years ago by OCLC of American art museums to see if their data was compliant with CDWA and CCO. And all of the museums included all of these recommended core fields except subject. Only 2, I believe, included subject. So this is an area where end users and researchers want to know what the subject is, but museums have not typically been recording it. So maybe CONA could help in this way, to capture the ofness and aboutness of the work through the description, identification, interpretation of the subject. We've done whole workshops on how to index this. So for subject indexing, CONA can link to AAT, TGN, ULAN, CONA itself if one work depicts another, and something that is called the CONA Iconography Authority, as well as to other sources for subjects, such as U.S. Library of Congress authorities and ICON class, with whom we intend to work very closely. For general subjects, this is what is the minimum requirement, just one simple term for a general subject, and this is a controlled list and extensible. But in addition, it would be great to add terms that are linked to the Getty Vocabularies to describe the subject as specifically as possible. And we have to think of ways how to supply values when they're missing in large data sets. And we think we could investigate perhaps mining the titles and notes in the record to parse them and try to link them to subject matter. Here's an example of a photograph and how it could be linked for subject to the various Getty vocabularies. The Antietam battlefield linked to TGN. The event, American Civil War, is in CONA Iconography Authority. The sitters are in ULAN, and various terms from the AAT. Showing you the scope of what we could do here. Here we have a drawing of a built work, which is in CONA, so it's linked to itself, various terms from the AAT. And here we have a theme from religion and mythology, where the subject is coming from the AAT and the CONA Iconography Authority. The CONA Iconography Authority contains named events, religious and mythological iconography, as well as fictional characters and places and themes from literature, basically all the proper names of subjects that aren't covered by the other Getty vocabularies. Right now it's just a module within CONA, but over time it could become a standalone authority through contributions. It also includes links to other sources such as ICON class and Library of Congress, etc. Here's a sample record from the CONA Iconography Authority. There's an ID and names and links to the AAT and TGN and ULAN, and it could be a very robust record to provide access. Now, in the final way CONA, we think, could be useful is to provide links between works. It can capture links between works within one repository, as a repository typically would do. It has a print, and a print's part of a subgroup, which is part of a larger group, and we can capture that. Here's another example from a museum where these various items are part of a T service, so that larger entity, the T service, can be the parent for all of these individual items. And we do have recommendations about when there should be a separate record for a part and the whole, but for repositories of these works, they already have rules in place, so it's not really necessary for them to learn this. In addition to these physical relationships, there can be conceptual relationships, and I'm just going to go through several of these because this is important when we're mapping to CDOC-CRM to make sure this can be accommodated. For one thing, here's a print that is in the Metropolitan Museum, and this print is part of a series. Now, the series is a conceptual thing. It's not really a physical thing, and we need to be able to indicate that the print is part of the series. Here's another example for multiples, where the title of the work is Christ Presented to the People. Rembrandt made a plate, and many prints, dozens of prints, have been printed from that plate. So in order to capture this and link them all together, there's the concept of the multiple, and then all the individual prints, which have their own records, their own dimensions. The museum has an ID for each one of these. They're precious objects cataloged individually. They're linked to the record for the multiple. Still talking about multiples, you could even combine these relationships with other fields. For example, state is a field. So Rembrandt made this print in 8 states, meaning it changed he changed the plate considerably 8 times. And you can combine in Kona these prints in different states from different museums all over the world to provide a way for scholars to study how this, even in one state, the prints vary from each other, and it would be very useful for research. Also, Kona could provide a way to talk about designs that represent works that were never constructed. So that's also a conceptual relationship to a non-existent work. This is the record for the actual Lincoln Memorial as it was constructed, as the architect and materials, etc. But there were several competitions for this monument, and there were plans made for it by the competitors and drawings, and all of these things individually could easily be linked together for the concept, for example, of Pope's pyramid design for this work of architecture, which was never constructed. But Kona could link all these things together. Also, Kona could virtually reconstruct disassembled works where the different panels for this altarpiece, for example, are held in different locations. And this is common with works of art and architecture. And it would be nice to be able to reconstruct them. Now, in addition to the whole part relationships, the associative relationships in Kona could be very useful for linking things. Here we have a drawing that is in the Getty Museum for the painting that is in the Metropolitan Museum. So here's a way to note that this drawing is a study for the painting in Kona. And this is my final slide on this. These relationships could become very complex and interesting. The Dome of St. Peter's is cataloged separately, perhaps as part of the huge St. Peter's complex. The dome has its own architect and plans and period of construction, so it might warrant a separate record. Then there's a Michelangelo drawing for that dome. It's a study for it. That's linked to the dome. Then there was a model made as a presentation before the dome was built, so there's a model for the dome. And then later, someone made drawings and prints of the model. So all of these things can be linked together in very interesting ways to allow scholarly research. Okay, so now I have just a few more slides to show from the editorial perspective what we've been doing to prepare for the release of linked open data. Now, the traditional use of our vocabularies for retrieval has focused mainly on the names and terms. So users would gather together all these names for Gian Bologna, for example, combine them together in a query, and bring back a number of sites that refer to the same artist, although he's cataloged under different names in different institutions. Well, now in the linked open data world, we're hoping to take advantage of these other rich relationships in the Getty Vocabularies, such as these associative relationships between patrons and teachers and students in the ULAN, to link to where things are linked or there are inferred relationships, to answer more complex questions and aid in serendipitous discovery. Now, the Getty Vocabularies have always been compiled by experts, and we use authoritative sources and have extensive rules for creating these records. But when this good data was seen through the LOD lens, any little inconsistency or omission became ever more obvious. So we have been working to remedy this. So for one thing, here's just one example. All of the Getty Vocabularies should be linked to each other where there is controlled terminology and it's appropriate. For example, in ULAN, the nationality list, it's really nationality, culture, ethnicity, was based on the AAT, and we tried to keep them in sync, but this was done manually. Now we require a link there. So we editors go through and work from problems in the data where we need to fix them by hand. For example, there might be no match. In ULAN, there was a nationality East German, and AAT did not have such a concept. We had to add that to make the link. You could have a false match where Hessian did map to a term that was Hessian in AAT, but this was a type of burlap. It was not the culture or nationality, so that had to be fixed. And you could have an ambiguous match as well. That was the last one. Anyway, I've gotten out of it, but where one term maps to multiple terms in the AAT, and so the editors had to determine which it should be mapped to. And that was my last slide anyway. And now my colleague Joan Cobb is going to tell you more technical information about this.
But maybe they have some questions while I put in my slide.
Okay.
How I do while she's getting ready, because this is just so impressive and mind-blowing in terms of the quantity of work and what it will accomplish, and how many people now are, staff-wise putting this together, whether it's updating AAT or CONA, what's the team?
It's a very good question. And by the way, I think most of you probably know this, but Eleanor was around in the seminal period when we were building these vocabularies, and she's the brainchild behind most of the work we're doing now. We have a very small staff. We have only 3 permanent editors and myself as the managing editor, and occasionally an intern or so. But that is why we rely so heavily on finding expert, authoritative, qualified contributors. And we rely on those contributors to be trained and to give us good, solid, clean information. And that is the only way we can do so much work, is to choose carefully who the contributors are.
Nevertheless, it is just so incredibly impressive. It's a universe with a set of tools for the cultural field, that you're providing, the glue, and in-depth expertise to make sense of, when we document of cultural objects.
Thank you, Eleanor. I think one time Joan was at a Lowland meeting and someone described it as a game changer that we published the Getty Vocabularies as LOD, and I think that is true.
Are there any other questions for Patricia? Is anyone still there?
Yeah. We're here.
Okay.
Okay. I think they're just overwhelmed.
We're awestruck.
There we go.
So this is largely part of the presentation I gave at CDOC, and I thought it might be useful to this group too, because it was a long journey to decide to come into the semantic arena. And I thought maybe for some of the people who are just beginning their journey, what we went through might be helpful to them. So basically, it all starts with, these pictures are of our International Terminology Working Group. So these were the 2 last meetings that we had that were in Dresden at CDOC and the previous ones. And these are all the institutions that are actually concentrating on doing the work to translate the AAT into Chinese, Spanish, German, and Dutch, and more. But when people start to say that one person can make a difference, they really can, because this woman, Marcia Zhang, who many of you know, for years she kept harping at us about why aren't we putting our data? We're going to be behind the times. She was saying that the change that's coming in just the next few years is going to be as dramatic as moving from client-server applications to internet-based applications, and that if we don't actually think ahead, we won't be as helpful to that community as we could be. But we had all kinds of other things to do, and so we listened. But basically, every time someone called us, we would say, "Oh, that's nice. Here's samples of our data. Go figure it out and let us know what you figure out, and maybe we can do it in the future." And actually, lots of people said they were interested, but nobody actually did that. Or if they did it for themselves and never let us know. So, so finally, I said to my colleagues and to Marcia, what if we gave you a challenge? And we did. We picked this record, and I'll show you why we picked this record. First of all, it was rich in the number of terms it had, and some of the complexities that from our data to LOD, which we didn't know when we designed our database, but found out quickly in LOD, that, for example, this construct where Raita is the same spelling in English, Greek, and Spanish, or English transliterated Greek and Spanish. In our database, this has one ID. In the LOD world, each one of these combinations has to be unique. So we had to solve that problem. We also hold parts of speech for our data, and we did not want to lose that. Someday we hope to run our entire editorial system off the linked data repository. We keep scope notes in different languages. Whoops. Come on. Sorry. Now I'm going to have to go through this again. I'm going to go here.
There.
Yeah, but now I got
it up there, I hope.
Yeah, but display settings again. Sorry about that. And our relationships, as Patricia said, we have multiple parents. We also have a full set of associative relationships. And I put the URL here of the PDF that actually talks about all of the associative relationships that our data has. It's very rich. But then every piece of our data is sourced. And for example, that's one of the criticisms to VF right now, and I think they're trying to solve it too. But you know, when you have a bunch of data that's harvested from a lot of different institutions, that's fine for the institutions that are looking at their own data. But then another institution comes and wants to use that data, and they don't know which of the conflicting pieces of information they want to use. And so having sources behind that allows someone to say, oh, I want to see the terms that were preferred by the conservation community, or that are I trust the Rijksmuseum more than I trust this other. You know, so it adds a lot of richness. This was, again, part of our complexity. And also we have a fairly rich revision history. And part of the other complaints that I was hearing about some linked open data repositories is that there's no tracking obsolete subjects. And also when things change, why should I care? In some cases, if I'm at a high enough level, I don't care. I'm just going to show the data. But in some cases, what I've done in my own collection depends on decisions that were made in someone else's collection. You need to know when those important pieces of information changed. So Marcia came back with a 62-page document. She showed us how we could, in fact, map to SCOS, convinced us that we should map to SCOS, that we should be part of the linked data world. And at the same time, Eleanor and the ISI group were meeting with us to tell us what they were doing with the Smithsonian. And I remember this, Eleanor, one particular conversation where we were, first of all, we had to figure out what everybody meant by vocabulary and ontology. But once we got past that, there was a pretty contentious but pretty groundbreaking conversation where the people at the Getty who had not seen the light yet were in a room listening to Eleanor and the ISI people, and yet they were right. They were saying a new day is coming and you better pay attention. Well, with this document and calls like Eleanor's, and the fact that Jim Kuno followed the Rijksmuseum by saying we will be part of the open content world, we felt that our time had finally come. And so it wasn't a matter of when to do it or what to do, it was we were going to do it now. And in fact, we were going to have to make a lot of decisions. Were we going to be truly open? We know our data was linked. What license will be used? All of that. And so we jumped in. And in fact, some of these links that I'm putting in here now were these were not only the resources that helped me understand personally, but they also helped my management understand. The Tim Berners-Lee TED Talk is a very short TED Talk that really talks about what he asked people to do a long time ago, and by 2011, a couple of important applications and why that made such a difference. And the Europeana video is fun to watch, and it was just, it sort of skirted the issue about what complexity was and, you know, what it could do for you. Also, once we had decided to do it, we actually asked Pedro if he would meet with us, or we actually went to ISI, and you know, we just were, the lead programmer and I were just overwhelmed by, okay, how do we get from Oracle to Triple, and what does it mean to have an ontology, and why are there so many, and how do you map to, how do you pick one, and what do you do, and what does it look like, and all of that. And so Pedro actually took us through an installation of Karma. We took 2 of our tables, and he helped us map, make me, you know, a really, he did a very small, specialized ontology, you know, with just a few relationships. He also added, you know, some of the suggested stack that we might need for the ontology, showed us how to load them in order into Karma, how to map a couple of the relationships, and then how to export them into triples and what the triple looked like. And that exercise was like somebody finding a light switch in a dark room. I mean, it didn't answer our questions. It pointed out more problems that we were going to have to solve. But frankly, that one exercise and that one-day exercise with Pedro or someone like him that was able to take a subset of your own data and walk you through the process that was the key. After that, it was just, okay, what do we do next? And what do we do next? What do we do next? Also, I do recommend Arrow's book, whose last name I can never pronounce correctly. Haunen, I think. It's an interesting book on the cultural heritage. It's actually Arrow who said it's a game changer at Little M last year.
Okay.
We also have contributed to the Virtual International Authority file for years. So, of course, we looked at their data and what they did with their RDF exports. And then once we had done a lot of this research, Greg, the lead programmer, and I attended the Semantic Technology and Business Conference in San Francisco in 2013. We did that because I wanted to see how far behind we were in adopting this new technology. And I thought if I go out and see what the Googles and the Yahoos and the other business people were doing, I'd either feel really bad or pretty good. And what I found out is that I felt pretty good because we were not behind. As Emmanuel said, we were part of the bleeding edge here, trying to figure it all out. And, you know, I felt more comfortable thinking about we are all, no matter what our institutes call us, we are all doing R&D right now. We are all, and I keep hearkening it back to the days when Eleanor and Patricia and I worked together at the Getty as when we were AHIP, the Art History Information Program, where everything was new, and that's what we were trying to do. So I had to keep that in the back of my mind. Don't be scared. Just go forward. And then finally,
I'm going to write that down.
The LoadLam meeting in Montreal, I went to that because David Farneth at the Research Institute said that it really should be someone more technical that went. on their behalf. And so I went. I didn't know what I was going to find there. But what I found out, there were a lot of people in our same situation, all of whom needed to talk to each other, wanted to talk to each other, wanted to collaborate, and that is a really important organization, I think. And then finally, I added the R2RML mapping language links because, in fact, what we decided to do for our own data, because we have very rich, well-constructed, intelligently, I must say, myself, fielded. I mean, this is a database that was constructed through collaborative effort between the technical team and Patricia's team. This is not some vendor or some technical person building a data structure without the input of the editorial team. And that's, I think, Emmanuel, you made that point very clearly as well. So we wanted to use the intelligence of the relational database, and we found that there were just too many problems. We'd lose too much in the richness of the data to use a generic tool. You know, so we evaluated Karma, we evaluated UltraWrap, we evaluated a lot of different tools, but the R2RML language was very rich. They were very open to some of the problems we found. When we had trouble mapping our languages, the 110 languages, I might add, to individual terms, we suggested, some fix, basically, or adjustment. They were open. We found a Perl library because both Greg and Vladimir, who is our consultant on this, both and I all speak Perl, so that was a good solution for us, and we were able to add to the Perl open source a module that could handle the languages the way we needed to have them handled. Basically, we have our data in Oracle. This may not be the same for all of our databases, by the way. We're working on an abstracted indexing project also for the Conservation Institute that does not have a logically built good relational database, but we export the data into a very well-constructed XML with an XML schema, so we might be using some of the XML tools for that. So anyway, we have the Oracle. We're using R2RML and Perl to export the data and validate the triples. We are using the Owlum triple store now. We will continue to use Owlum through the time that we have all of the data sets that we currently have money to export. What we do after that, I don't know. Right now it's serving us well. We import the triples through the Sesame console into Owlum, and we offer a Sparkle endpoint. Right now, our architecture, we've just updated the servers, right now we have only one repository, and that repository will include all of the Getty vocabularies. But by the end of this next calendar year, there will be 3 repositories: the vocabulary repository, the museum repository, because we are intending to emit the Getty Museum records also, and the AATA Online, which is the abstract and indexing service for the GCI. Further down the road, I've heard talk about our provenance database and some others.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So then we started saying, okay, now that we know kind of what we're doing and how we're doing it, how do we see the vocabularies? What place do the vocabularies hold in the greater open data world? And to just say what Patricia was talking about before, a little graphically, we started with AAT because we see this as the core of all the vocabulary records. Once you add TGN, they are connected with AAT through place types. With ULAN, even more connections. But with CONA, it all really comes together. And so CONA becomes a really interesting vocabulary for us, and its place in the linked open data world is one of the things we are spending a lot of time these days talking about. So if I take this now and I add the records in the museum that we are currently talking about adding into the linked data world, the museum, our Getty-wide search, the provenance index, the abstract and indexing service at the GCI, and we then add our partners, who we already know are linking back to us, and they add their partners, and they add their partners, we start to see a cloud that is worth our effort. You know, the fact that we know that we will be useful to a lot of people, which is part of what the mandate at the Getty has been. You know, the first question you ask when you do a project is not only what will it mean to us, but what will it mean to the community we serve. So we do see ourselves as being part of the glue. Thanks for that that term, Emmanuel. And here's how we think, starting to think of CONA helping. All of you and our own museums, and our own museum is right now the guinea pig. We don't have a mapping tool, but I put it in you know, dots over here because we need to have a mapping tool. There should be a way that an institution can actually take our interim XML and or maybe something different than this, but something that everybody agrees on. Maybe it's CDOC CRM when we finally get it mapped, but where you can use your own intellect to map. And I think all of us are dancing around what this looks like right now and who's going to do it. We have some ideas. We'd like partners. We do have an XML that we do publish that we say if you can get your data into this XML, what happened to my cursor? Here it is. We do have and I wouldn't call this a prototype because it could be almost production level, but it was an internally built application that takes these strings that come to us, and I keep losing my, the data that comes to us in XML, puts it through our own validator, which is where we make the connections to the other vocabularies. And this is built on many years of the rules that we have developed to match incoming data with our data, and allows Patricia's team to actually analyze the data and to resolve anomalies. But just think about a world where that application were open source and that someone who knew their data intimately could collaborate on a webinar with Patricia's team to set some rules. Because that CONA validation application actually has the ability for someone to look at a data and say, oh, for this institution, when I say XYZ, I mean, you know, ABC, and to set a rule and to reprocess the data, and then Bob's your uncle. You probably don't understand it. Then it's a done deal. At the end of the validation application process, the records that are generated are actually input for all the vocabulary. So from that, we generate contributions to AAT, contributions to TGN, contributions to ULAN, and contributions to CONA. And they got entered into our editorial system where, in my personal opinion, I think that Patricia's team, instead of doing all that pre-matching, could be very valuable in helping make the connections between institutional records. So we would like to free them from one thing and have them work on the things they are very expert at. Then by the time we publish it to the link to open data, the contributing institution, we would give them the Sparkle queries to get their own links back, and so you have a full circle. But we also, in the meantime, would be giving you ways to synchronize your data through web services. And I'm going to give you an example of this that happened not through our interim XML and the Kona validation, but a real-time a few years ago when I think it was UVA, was it the American Indian records, were giving us records for Yulan, American Indian artist. But before we could load those artists, of course, there were roles we didn't have. There were places in the Native American nations that we didn't have. And so that process is all hand done. And now we think that it could be automated from what we've learned. So the result is we put together a set of screens. This is the public face. There's the URL for it. It has the list of the people we've collaborated with. It has our documentation, our ongoing, our ongoing effort. We also have this one here is to anybody who's interested in the project who speaks English. This one is for a programmer to explore our data. And it's got a full set of documentation. It's over 100 pages. It is worth the trouble to read if you want to use this data. And also it has a Sparkle endpoint with sample queries so people can just look at the data themselves before they actually start to use it. The Art and Architecture Thesaurus was announced by Jim Kuno in a blog in February. And I have to say, within days, people were starting to use it. In August, we announced that the TGN, the Getty Thesaurus of Geographic Names, was released. And in the first few days, there were over 1,700 hits on this blog and over 200 tweets. And again, people started to use it. It's very gratifying, by the way, to find that out. Some people actually let us know they were using it, which is more gratifying. There's Ethan Gruber from the Numismatic Society. He's the person who used it within hours after we released it. Just people who did various visualizations. John Voss from Lodlam said it was the most important event in 2014. We'll see about that, but we were happy to see that screen that Marcia sent us. The Partage Plus project has used it. They've mapped to AAT. This is part of Europeana. And the Europeana announced just a little while ago, a few days ago, that they have implemented the AAT for real. Greg Razor from UCSD has a prototype for a plugin to Adobe Bridge. He hopes to make this open source. And Anthonias Velos has done a Drupal plugin that links to both of the databases. We're evaluating that for our Scholars Workbench. And others, including this Chinese project from one of our partners. So anyway, these are the things we're working on now. And the things that are very interesting to us is that we start to jump into a different world now. With ULAN, and especially with the museum data and Kona, we are definitely looking to map that to the CDOC CRM. And we talked to a bunch of people at CDOC this year in Dresden. We're very excited about that. We have we've started the mapping where we're taking all of our fields and trying to figure out how it maps to CDOC CRM and to Lido. We're working with our own museum and hopefully with more of the community as soon as I can get them access to our Confluence. we had hoped to release the ULAN in January, but because we're also working on all of these at the same time, that's going to be pushed out. We're now thinking that we'll have a beta in March and a release in April, because we have to do the museum and Kona at the same time, at least to identify the ontology mapping. So anyway, that's where we are.
I just want to say to both of you, Patricia and Joan, that if we were in one room, everyone would be standing up now and giving you a standing ovation because this is so great. And I do have a question, but I don't want to be the first one.
I have a request, though.
Okay, I know. That's probably. But go ahead.
Everyone, this is a time when if we were ever going to work together, we should be working together, because I think one of the things Emmanuelle said in her presentation is about, we may not have the same data fielded in the same fields in our own personal databases or our own XML records or whatever, but we should be looking at the same mapping or similar mappings or mappings that we can do crosswalks with into CDOC CRM. And so if anyone's figured it out for their own data, I think we should have a place where we can share that mapping with each other. Mm-hmm. And with us.
Yeah, I could, I was thinking the same thing while you were presenting, of how as the American Art Collaborative moves forward to publish and create this critical mass linked open data, that this could, be fed to Kona and from there parsed out to ULAN and TGN and, so forth.
Except that we're all doing it at the same time. So there's going to be some stuff, we're going to be like concentric circles, all exploring. But at some point, as we say, well, I decided this and you decided that, there'll be some ways to come together again.
How about out there? Anyone? I know you must be, again, overwhelmed. Both presentations were excellent. Any questions, though?
Yes, hi, this is Neil. Question for either Joan or Patricia. I think Patricia mentioned icon class in the context of her talk, and it made me wonder, what are the plans, if any, and on what timeline to integrate complementary vocabularies like icon class into the body of AAT or any of the other vocabs?
Actually, icon class, iconography really is outside the scope of the AAT. The AAT are generic terms, and icon class are proper names of iconography, so we wouldn't really map it to the AAT. But with our iconography authority, we are working with icon class to make sure that we overlap wherever possible, and where not, we link back and forth to each other. Icon class, the Kona Iconography Authority is a thesaurus. So we need like short terms or phrases to describe it and to put it in hierarchical order, whereas icon class has those long strings that describe subject matter, and for some subjects in more depth than we would need for Kona. So they need to, I think they're complementary. They aren't the same thing, but we are in touch with them, and we plan to work very closely with them.
Who is it now, by the way?
The RKD, isn't it?
The RKD. The RKD.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. And it's anyone's left over from? Is Hans Brandhorst involved?
He's involved in that. He's interested, but I'm not sure if he has, the legal authority to let it, to operate together and all that. But we're all in agreement that we want to work together.
So thanks for that bit of information about icon class. I'm wondering if there are other examples out there, other vocabularies that you might consider integrating, using, collaborating with, etc.
Well, the main ones for us are icon class and the Library of Congress subject headings, which many of our contributors use, and some of those do overlap with the AAT, and they are linked to the AAT as much as possible. We link on the spot as we create the records. There are a few other specialty sets of information out there about iconography, but there's nothing that is comprehensive the way that Kona Iconography Authority needs to be. For example, there are little projects about Greek iconography or ancient Indian iconography with one of our partners, and we would hope to collaborate with them and link back to them or ingest their data.
One of the things that there are a lot of vocabularies out there, though, and but I'm not sure that putting them all into one hierarchical thesaurus vocabulary is even in the cards, or even would you want that. If concepts can link at the concept level, regardless of who that institution thinks their parent is, and as long as some parent along the hierarchy of the larger vocabulary is there, they should be able to find each other in the linked world.
Right.
Because you've got a broader instantive parent that might say, I'm an object or I'm a material, and that's maybe all you need in your local vocabulary, but I know that I'm a particular type of marble. And
we wish we understood how that might work. I mean, in theory, yes, but it would be good to see how that might work. Do you know what I mean? I mean, this is, I think, the hope we all hold for linked open data.
Marcia might help us. Marcia Zhang. She gave a wonderful short talk at our last International Terminology Working Group about the value of microthesauri and how to create microthesauri from the AAT or from the TGN. But also, she was talking to me personally about the converse of that, of how to take your microthesauri and map it into an existing vocabulary. So that might be a future discussion.
Yeah, this is Dwayne. I just want to echo that is a hot topic right now. When we were at the LoadLab training day at Semtech, that was also part of the discussion there as to whether vocabularies will get larger or smaller, and if they get smaller, more distributed. And that was a theory that was being put forward as well by Richard Wallace from OCLC and Marcia, who was there. And so it's a very active discussion and an interesting one.
And I'm going to let someone else handle that because we've all got our plates full just getting the data out there.
Right.
Yeah, I think Marcia said that same thing, Dwayne.
Questions?
Yeah, I just wanted to congratulate the Getty team, really. This is Emmanuel again. It is absolutely a game changer. That really means that now we can embed those AAT URIs in our data set, and that's really wonderful for us, but also for everybody who uses our data. But Joan, you mentioned the Getty Museum a little bit early on.
Yes.
And how you would be making that data set available as linked open data as well. I wonder if you can elaborate on that a little bit.
Okay, so I'm going back to this screen because there are guinea pigs. The Getty Museum uses the museum system, TMS, but they also export data into something they're calling the DOOR, which is another database. Their data, they've consistently used a lot of the data that is in our vocabularies, and through TMS and through just looking it up or contributing to ULEN. But some of the data doesn't have the IDs, and because they're using an old version of TMS, the IDs may also be old. Jay Hoffman is using an older version of AAT for some of the releases. So we're going through an exercise where we've given them we have done some extracting from their data into our interim XML over here. And we have decided that actually, because there are rules that we can do in the Kona validation application, we're going to take our museum data probably by object type. So they'll be doing sculpture, oil painting separately. I mean, they can get that data out of their database and then put each group into the Kona XML, and then their editor is going to work with our programmer to use the Kona validation application, and with Patricia, we're going to try to curate it and improve it. We hope that we will find a partner, or we will convince the Getty to give us more money to hire someone to help us build this out as open source. But right now, we're really trying to just get museum quality data with all the fields we need into Kona so that we can test this round-trip project. But at the very least, we are committed to, in one way or another, even if we have to hand-edit it, releasing museum data as LOD sometime this summer. But, you know, it's going to be a combination. This first pass isn't going to be smooth.
Right. Yeah. Thank you. No, that's great.
But we are going to use the Perl module R2RML for this and take it straight from an Oracle database.
Is Rachel still on?
Rachel just had to step away.
Okay. Well, I just wanted to say, when Rachel and I were sitting at ISI when it all began for the Smithsonian, and we were presented with the concept of linked open data, we looked at each other. And later on, we compared notes. And then we started to say, it's about connecting the dots in this, what I term an art cloud. We'd like to see an art section of the linked open data cloud. And Patricia actually put on the Getty website the talk I gave at Princeton about art clouds. But we said, can you imagine if the Getty Vocabularies were part of that art cloud? And so here we are now. This is so exciting that this is all moving forward. And I don't know if anyone else has a question, speak up now, because I'm just about ready to, to conclude here. So are there any other questions?
I just wanted to say that this cloud finally got updated, and we made it in.
Oh, fantastic.
We are like right
really?
Somewhere here.
That is okay.
I can't, I have to find it, but it's like in this area right here.
So everyone, that's our aim. We've got to get in there. Yes. Okay. This is good. I have to get a copy of that. And also to say, I hope we can put the slides up on the website.
Yeah.
And make them available so everyone can go back and study them again, since this was, a wealth of information to take in. Well, thank you so much. We all thank you, really. Again, as I said, if we were all in the same room, there would be a standing ovation. Thank you.
It's really nice to have to hear everyone else's talks, and I'm going to go to your website and look at the presentation. We're also on Data Hub. We've tried to flesh out, a little bit about it, and links for people who really don't know to come directly to us. So, anyway.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you guys for inviting us.